Thank you very much, Detective. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth would call Angela Scheideger, please.
I'm just going to ask you to stand behind the blue line and face the clock.
If you could raise your right hand for me, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the cause now in hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You may be seated.
Come around. What's your step? Come on. Go in that chair. Then we speak on the microphone before we
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Good afternoon. Introduce yourself to the members of the jury, telling them your first and last name, and then spelling your last name.
Sure. I'm Angela Scheideger, and I'm a physician assistant in the emergency room. Last name is Scheideger.
What hospital do you work in? What emergency room?
I work primarily not Melrose Wakefield, but also at Anna Jake's Hospital.
How long have you worked at Anna Jake's?
About 5 years as a PA.
And what is a PA?
A physician assistant, so I'm one of the providers in the emergency room.
And as a provider in the emergency room, can you describe very briefly to the jury what your duties and responsibilities are as a provider in the emergency room?
So we independently see patients that come into the emergency room, and then we discuss with our attendings, like, depending on the case, but we order tests, we perform certain procedures, we interpret images along with radiology and talk to specialists and whatnot.
When you say the attending, who is that?
The primary doctor that's on with me in the emergency room.
So there'd be an emergency room doctor, a physician's assistant, and then potentially nurses who are assisting you?
Exactly, and nurse practitioners, which have the same role as my job.
In the emergency room at Anna Jake's, how does a physician's assistant differ from a nurse in terms of your responsibilities and duties?
Sure. I place the orders typically, and then nursing would draw blood or help care for the patient in other ways, give vital signs, that type of stuff. They're, I think, more involved with being at the bedside with the patient.
And as a physician's assistant, are you more involved, if, as you indicated, the orders, but also looking at the results of certain tests that you ordered to make determinations of how to treat a patient?
Yes.
Very briefly, what is your educational background?
Sure. So I went to PA School at Franklin Pierce and graduated in 2021. And I have worked in the emergency room ever since then. I worked previously in the emergency room as a technician prior to PA School.
Prior to PA School, you were a technician. What were your duties and responsibilities in the emergency room as a technician?
Sure. Vitals, I did EKGs, I transported patients to tests, helped providers if they needed help with certain procedures.
Excuse me. Can you kind of take us through when a patient comes into the emergency room at Anna Jake's via ambulance, what happens?
It depends. So if they are, if there's a room available and they're a critical patient, they go right into a room. Nurses will be at the bedside. They'll triage them, talk with the EMS, and then the patient if they're able to provide information. And then one of the providers goes in to evaluate the patient.
And I want to specifically turn your attention to November 11th of 2022. Were you working in the Anna Jake's emergency room that morning?
Yes.
Do you remember what shift you were assigned, what your hours were?
Yeah, I was working at 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. that day.
At some point, did you have an occasion to be the physician's assistant for a patient by the name of Leroy Fowler?
Yes.
And was he a patient at Anna Jake's when you came in at 9 a.m.?
I don't remember if he was there before I got there, but I saw him pretty quickly after I got to work. So
And what observations did you make of Mr. Fowler when you got to work around 9 a.m. that morning?
So he came in and he was altered. He was not really able to provide any information. He was thrashing around in the stretcher and not making any, valuable sentences or words that made sense to kind of tease out what was going on at that point.
Were you asking him questions and there was some type of response, but not something that was in response to your actual question?
Yeah, correct. I don't remember him ever giving me like a specific word that I thought was valuable in what I was asking him.
When you say altered, could you describe to the jury what you mean by altered?
Sure. He was basically incoherent. He, again, was not able to provide information or communicate like a normal person would. He wasn't following commands, was thrashing around in the stretcher.
Did you make observations of his eyes at any point?
Yes. So he had equal pupillary response, but it was slightly slower than usual.
What does that mean?
I believe it can be from a lot of things. So you can see it with certain medications. You can see it with head injuries. There's many different things. Light can affect it in general.
Is it fair to say when you first got there, because he was unable to appropriately or in any way answer your questions, you didn't have any information as to what had caused him to come to the emergency room?
Right. When I first saw him, I had really nothing except that he was altered. And I believe we didn't have like good records on him for review. So I had very limited information in terms of past medical history, medications he takes, stuff like that.
When someone comes into the emergency room altered and provide that type of information to you, what is the procedure? What did you order to happen?
So altered mental status is very common in the emergency room, and some of the stuff is pretty standardized, but it also varies based off how severe their symptoms are. But we, check labs for abnormalities, look at glucose levels, look for infection, look for signs of trauma. There's a lot of different things that can cause altered mental status that we kind of gauge out.
Based on the observations that you are making of Mr. Fowler upon your immediate interaction with him around 9 a.m. that morning, what was your plan?
Yeah, so he came in and was very altered. His vital signs, I believe, were pretty normal, but I knew that he was going to be a critical patient. So I pretty quickly spoke with the doctor that I was working with that day and was trying to figure out if we had ICU beds available for the patient, and we didn't. And that was just an assumption based off how he presented that he would need a higher level of care. So I knew pretty early on that he probably was going to have to be transferred to another hospital.
And when you said needed a higher level of care, is that why you deemed him critical?
Yeah.
And is that common if Anna Jakes doesn't have an ICU bed available, that you would make arrangements with another hospital to get an ICU bed?
Yep. Very
Specifically going back to those initial observations of him, at some point, did someone come into the emergency room with Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
And was it a male or a female?
Female.
Was she there when you got there, or did she arrive shortly thereafter?
I think she came shortly after.
Was she providing you information as to what had happened to Mr. Fowler prior to him coming to the hospital?
Yes.
And what, to your memory, did she tell you?
So she identified herself as his girlfriend, and she said that the day prior he was acting normal, and that they were doing yard work, I believe, and then overnight it sounds like she, I think, got woken up in the middle of the night by him, and she said that he had fallen multiple times, and then around 6:30 in the morning, I believe, she had noticed that he was much more altered.
What was her demeanor as you were speaking to her?
She was pretty calm, and right by the bedside next to the patient, she was trying to be very helpful, I felt like, and answered the questions that I asked her.
Is it fair to say that any observations that you made of Mr. Fowler during your interaction with him, as well as any treatment that was given or requested, is documented in medical records that are kept by the hospital?
It should be, yep.
In this case, you've had an opportunity to review those medical records, correct?
Yes.
And in those records, did you actually document the conversation that you had with the female identifying herself as Mr. Fowler's girlfriend?
Yes.
With the court's permission, I'm going to show a portion of what's previously been marked as Exhibit 6.
You may.
Just one moment.
Sorry. Oh, this is not going to be helpful. If I can. Can you see that on the screen, or is it really blurry?
I can read it.
Okay, let's see what we do. So, Ms. Scheideger, in the history of present illness, did you specifically document the conversation that you had with the girlfriend of Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
And did you indicate, she states that yesterday he was behaving completely normally and they were doing a bunch of yard work together. He woke her up from sleep at 3:30 stating that he had fallen 3 times and she did not think that he was particularly altered at that time. This morning at 6:30, she found him and he has been extremely altered since. She tried to bring him to bed but states he was dead weight and then fell out of the bed.
Yes.
Regarding no recent illnesses, he has not vomited. He has complained of abdominal pain to his girlfriend prior to arrival. Are all of those things that were provided by the girlfriend while she was in the emergency room with him?
Yes.
Did she also indicate that he may have taken a Percocet last night, but she is not sure?
Yes.
As part of the labs that you had ordered initially, was testing for narcotics part of that?
Yes.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. And what narcotics specifically are you testing for?
I think there's a list. There's a list of the ones that we tested for. There's a lot, but there's opiates, and then we have fentanyl, and there's other types of drugs that we test for immediately in the toxicology screen.
And in your review of the results of the blood test that was taken for Mr. Fowler on that day for any narcotics, did you see any indication that he was positive for Percocets?
No.
I'm going to show you another portion of Exhibit 6 with the court's permission. It's page 4 of the summary, including the lab results. And if you could just kind of take us through what is depicted in this page.
Sure.
Judge, I would object. I think that speaks for itself.
Pursuant to our conversation at sidebar, I will allow both counsel, if they wish, to highlight a few selected portions of the medical records. Jurors, you need to understand that you'll have the entire medical records in front of you, but if counsel wish to draw your attention with a witness on the stand to a particular portion, I'm going to permit them to do that. Unless the witness is someone like the present witness who may have some particular expertise and is construing the record, you can read the records as well as anybody else. I will simply allow them to be highlighted for you right now. Go ahead, Ms. Strasing.
Could you just kind of take us through what this is?
Sure. So this is the urine toxicology screen that we do. And the thing that came back positive was cocaine, but oxycodone, which is one of the active ingredients in the Percocet, is negative addition, and the opiates are negative as well on there. And I think somewhere there's a specific fentanyl test. I believe it's maybe on another page, but that's also negative.
So there was no indication in, I believe you said it was a urine test, not a blood test, I apologize, that Mr. Fowler was positive for Percocets.
Correct.
In reviewing the, actually before I get into that, in the medical record, did you also document observations that you made of him during your interactions with him?
Yes.
I'm going to show you page 2 of 12 in Exhibit 6. You indicated that the vital signs were fairly normal?
Yep.
And in the general, thrashing around, eyes closed, grunting, and not answering any questions. Are those the observations of you that you made of him upon going into the emergency room?
Yes.
Then you went on to talk about his skin, his head, his eyes, specifically bolded is pupils with decreased response to light and accommodation bilaterally, pupils round. What does that mean?
So, like I said, that can happen with certain medications that people are prescribed or take. It can happen with injuries, brain injuries, and your eyes respond to light in general. So if the room's super bright or dark, it can change that.
And the other portion that was bolded is under neuro, alert, altered, does not answer any questions, uncooperative. Why is that under the neuro section of that assessment?
Because altered mental status and assessing if someone's alert and oriented is part of a neurologic assessment. So that's where we would document that.
So based on what you were seeing and what you were observing in his pupils, did you order a CAT scan?
Yes.
Why did you order a CAT scan?
For, I guess, multiple reasons, but the girlfriend had said that he had fallen, and those seemed like they were unwitnessed falls, and he was altered. So to look for a head bleed, to make sure the vessels in the brain were patent, other things would be like a mass or something that's causing altered mental status.
And at some point, did you receive the results of the CAT scan that you ordered?
Yeah, and
What were the results of the CAT scan?
it was negative. There was no acute findings.
And at some point, did you also order a lumbar puncture to be done?
Yeah,
What is a lumbar puncture?
sure. It's when you put a needle in the back to obtain cerebrospinal fluid to look for infection. You can also sometimes measure the pressure in the brain that can cause altered mental status if it's high. So that's why we were looking for other causes of the confusion.
And what were the results of the testing of the, what did you say, the cerebral fluid?
Yeah, so I attempted, and the doctor I was working with also attempted, and we were unable to get it. It was hard with him in particular because he was not a cooperative patient, and it can be dangerous, to put a needle in the spine if they're thrashing around. So we did attempt, but we didn't get it. I don't know if it was obtained at another hospital.
At some point after the blood was drawn, obviously we've talked about the results of the cocaine and the Percocets. Were other lab results coming in for your review, as well as were you ordering additional labs throughout the time that Mr. Fowler was at Anna Jake's?
Yes.
And were any of the lab results coming back abnormal?
Yeah. I don't remember if his potassium was initially abnormal, but some of his electrolytes are abnormal, including the potassium, I believe the calcium as well. And then he had other signs that was pointing towards a metabolic issue. So we added a venous blood gas to look for at other causes.
What does all of that mean? So all of those things are abnormal. What was abnormal about the potassium?
So his potassium was high, which we can see pretty frequently. It doesn't necessarily point towards one thing, but when his bicarbonate and he had an anion gap on his CMP, his comprehensive metabolic panel, which prompted us to look at his pH, and we determined that he was in a metabolic acidosis.
What is metabolic acidosis?
It's when you have your acid levels are high in the blood, and it can be caused by a lot of things. It happens when there's an imbalance in the blood.
And what kind of things cause an imbalance in the blood?
Sure. You can get it from infection, you can get it from dehydration, you can get it from certain medications. Severe diabetes can cause it if you're having very high glucose levels. Kidney disease, there's a lot of different causes for it.
I think you also mentioned anion gap. Mm-hmm. What is that?
So that's part of your blood. You have certain electrolytes, specifically what they look at, what that is, sodium chloride and bicarbonate, I believe, and it's just a measured portion, but difference between them, and it can help to identify different causes of a metabolic acidosis.
And I'm going to show you a portion again of Exhibit 6, this time what's page 6 of 12. And it talks about the anion gap being 27. Is that correct? You can see that.
Yep.
And then the calcium is highlighted or bolded, I guess. What did you observe about the calcium?
So the calcium was abnormal as well. I didn't look too much towards that in regards to his symptoms. But with the anion gap, and then when you look further down at the VBG with the pH, and those are the things that we were kind of looking at.
So VPG with the pH, what is that?
That's the part of the component of a metabolic acidosis where the acid level is low in the blood.
And is it fair to say that while you're waiting to see if you can get Mr. Fowler to another hospital, to an ICU, you're doing all these tests to try to figure out what's going on?
Yeah.
And are you able at any point while Mr. Fowler was at Anna Jakes to get a definitive diagnosis as to what was causing all of these symptoms that you testified to observing and the various blood work that was coming back?
No, we couldn't come up with a definitive diagnosis before he was transferred.
Does your hospital, or I guess did your hospital in November of 2022 test Mr. Fowler to see if ethylene glycol was present in any of the blood that was drawn during his stay there?
So I don't believe I don't think that was tested when he was there that day because he was transferred, but it was something that they tested from the blood at the hospital, I believe. I don't know if it was ordered when I saw him.
Would the ethylene glycol have been able to be tested in the lab at Anna Jakes, or would it have been sent out?
Oh, yeah, it would have been sent out. It's not a test that we would have got back that day, probably not for several days.
So is it fair to say that there's some testing that the lab at Anna Jakes can't do there? It needs to be sent out to external labs for a specific type of testing?
Yep.
And is ethylene glycol one of those things?
Yes.
At some point did you have to give Mr. to calm him down?
Yes.
What did you give him?
I would have you pull up the chart, but I think we might have given him Ativan. We gave him common medications that we give to sedate patients.
And any medication that you gave to him at Anna Jakes would be contained within the medical records, is that correct? Additionally, at some point was a decision made that Mr. Fowler had to be intubated.
Yes.
And why did you make that decision?
With the doctor I was working with, yes.
And why was it your belief that Mr. Fowler had to be intubated?
So because we were having trouble transferring him, he was in the emergency room for a while at our facility. And with the progression of this metabolic acidosis, so we repeated labs and his pH had dropped more and he continued to be altered. And because of that, we did it to protect him and prevent anything from worsening.
As your pH is dropping, what is happening to your body during that time?
Sure. So your body is trying to compensate in multiple ways. One of the ways you can see this is with breathing. So he had kind of this irregular increased work of breathing that we can sometimes see when people have a very low pH. And it's the body's way to try and fix the acidity of the blood. But that indicates that it's more severe, which is why he was intubated.
And I guess I should ask you this. I'm sure we all have a common understanding, but what does it mean to be intubated?
Sure. It's when you are helping the patient breathe, so you put a tube down to protect their airway and to allow them to breathe properly.
At some point, was Mr. Fowler transferred from Anna Jakes to another hospital?
Yes.
Are you aware of which hospital he was transferred to?
Yep, he went to Mount Auburn.
Did you stay as the PA for Mr. Fowler during that entire time that you were in the emergency room as he was before being transferred to Mount Auburn?
Yes.
At any point, did the girlfriend that was with him ever show you any videos depicting to you what had happened to Mr. Fowler prior to him being taken to the emergency room?
No.
Did she indicate to you that she had videos if you wanted to see what was happening prior to his arrival there?
No.
Would that have been documented?
Yes.
If I may have one moment, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
Ultimately, during the time that Mr. Fowler was at Anion, did you ever come to a conclusion as to what was causing this?
No.
And is it fair to say during that time you were just trying to triage what you were observing before he could get to the ICU bed?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Norkunas.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Now, it's fair to say that this took place back on November 11th of 2022.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. And for the record, you have to give me a positive or negative answer. And you've had a few other patients since then till the present time, right?
Yes.
And you saw this gentleman along with what you were seeing. It's a hospital, so you had more than one patient that night, right?
Correct.
And you were running between the patients, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And in terms of coming in here today, you have to go out and read a whole bunch of stuff or you wouldn't remember to think about this, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you gave a statement to the police at some point in time, right?
Yes.
Back in February of 2023, right?
Yep.
And you had an opportunity to read that before you came in today, right?
Yes.
To try and refresh your memory, right?
Yep.
And did you, in fact, did the government present you with a copy of the medical records and ask you to review those as well?
Yes.
Now, one issue here was that it appeared that Mr. Fowler's condition was deteriorating while he was at your hospital, right?
Yep.
And he came into your hospital sometime around 9 a.m.
Yes.
and he left sometime around 8 p.m.,
I believe so.
somewhere around, so he was there like 12 hours, right? Approximately.
Yep.
And during those 12 hours, you know, reasonable as a medical professional that he was not improving, right?
Correct.
He was deteriorating, right?
Correct.
And at some point in time, the care that you and Jake's hospital could give to him was kind of stopped, right? You couldn't do anything more for him.
Correct, which is why we transferred him.
Right. And that was probably after he'd been there 3 hours, maybe?
What do you mean?
Well, he was there 3 hours, and then you're doing the blood work, you're doing the CAT scan. You were progressing him as rapidly as you could through the process of
Yeah.
the hospital, correct?
Sure. Yep.
And that probably took 3 to 4 hours?
Probably around that. I mean, you can see what time CAT scans came back and lab work came back in the record, but yes.
Okay. And and the lady that came in, you indicated when you were talking to the police that she was very helpful, right?
She was willing to provide information. Yep.
Right. She was appeared to be also, you had indicated, comforting to the gentleman that was the patient, right?
Yep.
And she stayed with him the time he was there, right?
I don't remember if she was there the whole time, but she was there.
All right. Again, it's hard to remember.
Yeah.
4 years ago, one person, one
Yeah.
room, one patient, right? And she appeared to be sympathetic to him, right?
Yes.
Now, you were asked, were you shown any videos of Mr. Fowler, correct, just a few minutes ago?
Yep.
And if you saw the videos and the person was standing, falling, or crawling, and you saw no blood and you saw no marks, what type of medical significance could that possibly have to you?
People can have internal bleeding that can cause them to be altered without seeing blood, but I didn't see a video.
Right. You can't, unless there's an exterior mark, unless there's bleeding, unless there's something that takes place, it's irrelevant, right?
I mean, I don't know that it's irrelevant. I think it could have been helpful to see how he was progressing, but I didn't see that, so I can't comment on it.
Now, and you get a medical history from the lady that came in, right?
Yep.
Were you able to get his full medical history from his local doctor or that was online?
No.
And when they did the toxicology tests, they showed cocaine was present, right?
Correct.
And it doesn't give you a duration or an amount, right? In other words,
Correct.
And did you, and in terms of either opiates or any of the other narcotics, that was the only one that was present, right? Cocaine.
For the urine toxicology screen that we got, the only thing that was positive was cocaine, yes.
Okay.
Alcohol was negative also, but that was a blood test.
Right. Now, did you think that the ingestion of cocaine was causing any of his problems?
No.
Why?
His heart rate was normal. Typically, you don't get that level of altered mental status with a cocaine overdose, but seeing it, you can always think, if I see anything positive on a toxicology test, it raises concern and makes us think about it.
He had a pacemaker, right?
Correct.
And what does cocaine do? It increases your heart rate, right? And at that point in time, was that adverse?
Well, his initial EKG, which I document in the chart, I don't think he was in a paced rhythm when he first came in, which sometimes people can have pacemakers that only go on with certain triggers. All I can say is his heart rate was normal when he got there.
Now, and you're not a toxicologist, right?
No.
Now, you said when you first observed this gentleman, you at that point in time don't know how long he had been there, correct?
In the emergency room?
Right.
Correct. I mean, in the chart, it says, I think that he got there just before 8 or just before 9. So, and I got to work right at 9. So I don't think he had been there that long.
Well, had there been a nurse attending to him prior to your arrival?
Yep.
Okay. And do you know that she'd been with him like half an hour or something prior to your arrival?
I don't know. You would have to look in the chart
Okay.
for timing.
But and that was Megan Berry?
Correct.
So she would have made the initial observations of him when he came into the hospital.
Yes.
And if there was any conversation with him, it would have taken place with her, potentially.
Potentially, yeah. It depends on who triage is and who else is in the room. Sometimes there's more people.
And again, you did the CAT scan because the girlfriend, and she identified herself as that, right?
Correct.
And she had told you that he had fallen and banged his head, and that's why you did the CAT scan, right?
I don't remember if she told me he banged his head, but she said he had fallen and he came in altered. And she had also mentioned he had abdominal pain, so we ended up getting imaging of his chest, abdomen, pelvis to look for other injuries or causes.
He had fallen several times, she told you, right? Mm-hmm. And you did an initial assessment of his head. There was no bleeding, there was no swelling, there was no bruising, right?
Correct.
So therefore, in that context, it did not appear to be have been a head injury, right?
So I've seen head injuries without external signs of trauma, but there was no obvious bruising or signs of trauma when he came in.
Well, it's a little bit, anything in life is possible, right? But generally, from your observations, it did not appear to have been a head injury.
Sure.
And you never had a definitive diagnosis. I think the term was you did not have a specific diagnosis by the time he left 12 hours later.
Correct.
May I have a moment, Judge?
Yes, you may.
Nothing further, Judge. Thank you.
Ms. Strasny,
Just very briefly, if I could approach with Exhibit 6, since
you may.
it was not very clear. You had indicated that, I'm going to show you the medical records. You had indicated in the records there is a list of the times in which Mr. Fowler was interacted with throughout the course of his stay there. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And is that essentially called the event history?
Yes.
Does it indicate what time he was received from the hospital, by the hospital, or came in, I guess?
Yes.
And what time was that?
8:54 a.m.
Does it document what time he was put into a room within the emergency room once he was received?
Yes,
And what time was that?
8:56.
And at some point thereafter, was he registered?
Yes.
What does that mean?
The people in registration get his information. In his case, I'm assuming they got his driver's license because he wasn't answering questions, but to get them registered in the computer.
And what time was that?
8:59.
So from the time he was received, he was registered within 5 minutes. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And then what happened next?
He was triaged, which is
Perfect. Yep, you read my mind. Go ahead.
typically by one of the nurses in the emergency room, and that's to get information, do the initial vitals, the initial assessment of the patient.
And what time was that initial triage?
9:01.
And is that when blood would have been initially drawn as well by the triaging
Typically,
nurse?
yes, but not always.
And then it says, the next says seen by provider at 9.
Correct.
And would that have been you?
Yes.
So he is received by the hospital at 8:54. All of those things we just discussed happen. And by 9:11, you're seeing him and making the observations that we just discussed.
Yes.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.